Imagine stepping off a plane in a new country, excitement coursing through your veins, ready to explore a vibrant culture, meet new people, and experience life beyond your familiar surroundings. Now imagine that same moment being met with stares, whispers, and subtle gestures that make you feel out of place. For millions of black travelers, migrants, and residents around the world, this scenario is not a rare exception, it is an all-too-common reality. From bustling city streets to quiet neighborhoods, from universities to workplaces, black individuals often encounter subtle exclusion, unfair treatment, or even outright discrimination simply because of the color of their skin. Traveling should be about curiosity and adventure, yet for many, it comes with an added layer of caution and awareness. In some countries, historical prejudices and systemic biases create environments where black people are treated differently. Whether it is being overlooked for opportunities, facing microaggressions in daily interactions, or experiencing hostility in public spaces, these challenges are compounded by media-driven stereotypes that misrepresent black communities, sometimes framing them as outsiders, troublemakers, or less capable of portrayal that spreads far beyond borders and influences social attitudes globally. Understanding these realities is essential not just for those planning to travel, but for anyone seeking to foster empathy and cultural awareness. By exploring these experiences, we can shed light on the hidden obstacles black individuals face worldwide and appreciate the resilience, courage, and contributions they bring to societies despite these challenges. It is not about blaming entire nations or condemning individuals. It is about recognizing patterns, understanding history, and being mindful of the social dynamics that continue to shape lives today. In this video, we will take you on a journey through 8 countries where black people often face significant challenges. We will dive into real-life stories, historical context, and cultural insights to help viewers grasp the complex reality of navigating life as a black individual abroad. From everyday encounters to broader systemic issues, the goal is to inform, educate, and inspire awareness so that everyone can approach travel, migration, and cross-cultural experiences with knowledge and sensitivity. If you are curious to learn more about the challenges black people face worldwide and want to understand the deeper stories behind the headlines, make sure to stay tuned until the end of this video. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our in-depth explorations into global social issues. By engaging with this content, you are joining a community that values empathy, education, and cultural understanding, helping us shine a light on stories that deserve to be heard. Buckle up, because what you are about to discover might surprise you, challenge your assumptions, and open your eyes to a world that is simultaneously welcoming and complicated for black individuals navigating it every day. To understand the challenges black travelers and residents face today, it is essential to trace the roots of racial attitudes that have persisted for centuries, stretching back to the era of European colonialism. Countries such as Italy, France, Belgium, and Portugal once held vast empires across Africa, shaping not only the political and economic landscapes of the regions they colonized, but also embedding ideas about racial hierarchy that continue to echo into the present. In those colonial times, Africans were often dehumanized, treated as resources to be exploited, and systematically denied the basic recognition of their humanity. This systemic perception of inferiority was not merely an abstract ideology. It was woven into every interaction, every law, and every institution, creating a social fabric that privileged European settlers while marginalizing the local populations. The legacies of these policies and attitudes did not vanish with the end of colonial rule. Instead, they were internalized by both the colonizers and the colonized, leaving behind subtle yet powerful traces in contemporary societal behavior. In Italy, for instance, the nation's colonial ambitions in Libya, Somalia, and Ethiopia during the late 19th and early 20th centuries established patterns of viewing African people as outsiders and subjects of subjugation. Even decades after these colonies gained independence, Italians' perceptions of black individuals remain tinged by historical narratives that associate dark skin with inferiority, social burden, or even danger. African migrants who arrive in Italy today often find themselves confronting these lingering prejudices in everyday life, from verbal harassment on city streets to discrimination in workplaces and housing. The echoes of colonial hierarchies are particularly visible in moments of heightened visibility, such as sporting events, where African descent footballers have historically been subjected to targeted racial abuse, illustrating how deep-rooted societal attitudes continue to influence interactions in modern Italy. France provides another vivid example of colonial legacy shaping contemporary racial dynamics. France's vast empire across West and Central Africa and the Caribbean created a complex network of migration and cultural exchange, but it also entrenched hierarchical ideas about race and social worth when individuals from former colonies migrated to metropolitan France. They carried with them the cultural richness of their homelands, contributing to arts, literature, music, and intellectual discourse. Yet, despite these contributions, many black French citizens encounter systemic obstacles in accessing education, employment, and social services, racial profiling by authorities, subtle exclusion in professional environments, and social stereotyping continue to reflect the historical conditioning that position black individuals as secondary to the white majority. The paradox is striking. While black culture is celebrated and widely admired, the people who create it still navigate a society structured by inherited biases and social hierarchies rooted in colonial history. Belgium and Portugal, though smaller in geographic scope compared to Italy and France, also left indelible marks on perceptions of blackness that reverberate today. Belgium's administration of the Congo was particularly brutal, with widespread exploitation and violence leaving a deep psychological and cultural imprint that persists in attitudes toward Congolese migrants and their descendants. In Portugal, centuries of colonial interaction with Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau similarly fostered a sense of hierarchical social order, which continues to influence how black Portuguese citizens and immigrants are treated in daily life. From casual social encounters to institutional barriers, across these nations, colonial history did more than subjugate territories. It created enduring narratives of otherness, reinforcing the idea that being black equated with being inferior, socially marginal, or economically burdensome. This historical backdrop helps explain why black travelers often encounter challenges even in countries without a direct colonial connection to Africa. The ideas and stereotypes cultivated during the colonial era were disseminated through literature, educational systems, and media, gradually embedding themselves in global consciousness. Negative portrayals of black people as dangerous, uneducated, or less capable seeped into cultural understanding, shaping how societies far from Africa perceive individuals of African descent. Even in contemporary global media, these stereotypes persist, subtly influencing social interactions, professional opportunities, and public perceptions, which means that the legacy of colonialism is not confined to former European empires. It has become a global phenomenon that affects black individuals everywhere. Understanding this connection between colonial history and modern prejudice is crucial not only for appreciating the lived experiences of black migrants and travelers, but also for recognizing resilience and agency of those who navigate these spaces daily. African migrants in Europe, for example, often display extraordinary perseverance, building communities, advocating for social justice, and contributing to the cultural and economic life of their host countries, all while confronting implicit and explicit bias shaped by centuries of historical inequity. Their experiences illuminate the profound ways history informs the present, showing that the echoes of colonial hierarchies are not merely academic concepts, but living realities that shape opportunity, perception, and personal safety. In telling these stories, it becomes clear that confronting and understanding the legacies of colonialism is essential for anyone seeking to engage thoughtfully with the world. Recognizing that systemic prejudice is not arbitrary but rooted in historical processes allows travelers, residents, and societies at large to approach racial dynamics with greater awareness and sensitivity. It also underscores the importance of celebrating Black contributions, acknowledging historical injustices, and working towards social structures that value equity and inclusion, ensuring that the shadows of colonialism do not continue to dictate the experiences of Black individuals in contemporary society. By tracing the lines from past to present, we can better comprehend the challenges faced by Black people globally while highlighting the courage and resilience that define their ongoing journeys. Long after the formal end of colonial empires, the perception of Black people around the world continued to be shaped by forces that extended far beyond the borders of Europe and Africa, particularly through the pervasive influence of global media, movies, television shows, advertisements, and news coverage became powerful vehicles for the transmission of ideas about race, embedding narratives that often cast Black people in a negative or marginal light. These portrayals did not merely entertain or inform, they subtly reinforced stereotypes that associated Blackness with danger, criminality, laziness, or hypersexuality, creating an atmosphere of suspicion and exclusion that could be felt even in societies without a direct history of colonization. In this way, the cultural echo of colonial hierarchies traveled across continents, shaping how Black individuals were perceived in places as diverse as East Asia, Eastern Europe, and South America, in countries like China and India, where colonial ties with Africa were minimal or non-existent. These media-driven narratives played a profound role in forming public perceptions. The few Black students, tourists, or professionals who found themselves in these regions often reported encounters with stares, intrusive questions, or assumptions that they were outsiders or troublemakers, experiences that were amplified by the lack of widespread exposure to diverse populations. While curiosity and unfamiliarity sometimes motivated these interactions, they were underpinned by broader societal beliefs shaped by global media, films that depicted Black characters as villains or criminals, news stories that emphasized negative incidents involving Black individuals, and advertisements that subtly framed lighter skin as more desirable all contributed to a perception that Blackness itself was something to be approached with caution or suspicion. These portrayals did not emerge in a vacuum, they were part of a continuum that traced back to colonial notions of hierarchy. Yet they were reinforced and disseminated in ways that reached far beyond the former European empires. The consequences of these representations are not merely abstract or symbolic. They manifest in tangible, everyday experiences for Black people navigating foreign societies. In China, for example, African residents have faced discrimination in housing, public services, and social interactions, sometimes justified by unfounded fears or assumptions fueled by media portrayals. During the COVID-19 pandemic, African communities in certain cities were unfairly blamed for spreading the virus, leading to evictions and exclusion from public establishments. These incidents highlight how deeply media-fueled narratives can influence policy and public behavior, demonstrating the real-world impact of biased representations. Similarly, in India, African students reported harassment and even violent attacks in response to rumors or assumptions that reflected stereotyped ideas about Blackness, ideas reinforced by a combination of historical colorism, social hierarchy, and the influence of international media narratives that rarely presented Black individuals in nuanced or positive roles. Even in countries with more diverse populations, such as Brazil or Russia, media portrayals continue to shape societal expectations and treatment of black individuals. In Brazil, the myth of racial democracy, that the nation is free of racial tension due to its mixed heritage, skews ongoing disparities that are perpetuated, in part, through media representations that celebrate black culture superficially while failing to address systemic inequality. Television, film, and advertising often highlight lighter-skinned actors or models, reinforcing a hierarchy of beauty and social value that marginalizes darker-skinned individuals. In Russia, where black communities are smaller and less visible, news and entertainment media frequently depict black individuals as foreigners or outsiders, feeding xenophobic sentiments and justifying discriminatory behavior by portraying them as inherently different or threatening. Across these diverse contexts, the power of media to shape perception becomes undeniable, illustrating how prejudice can be maintained and transmitted even without direct colonial contact. Understanding the role of media in perpetuating xenophobia and color-based prejudice is critical to grasping the full scope of challenges faced by black individuals worldwide. It explains why black travelers or residents often encounter exclusion or discrimination in societies where they might otherwise expect neutrality or acceptance. The images, narratives, and stereotypes circulated globally influence social interactions, policy decisions, and public attitudes, creating an environment where blackness is frequently othered, misunderstood, or devalued. Even as societies modernize and populations become more diverse, the historical patterns of representation continue to shape how people perceive and engage with black individuals, making media literacy and critical reflection essential tools for those seeking to navigate or transform these spaces. Yet, amid these challenges, there are signs of resistance and progress. Black creators, activists, and scholars around the world have worked tirelessly to challenge harmful portrayals, producing films, literature, and media content that reflect the complexity, creativity, and humanity of black lives by highlighting stories of achievement, resilience, and cultural contribution. These efforts counterbalance centuries of negative imagery, fostering greater understanding and reshaping perceptions. Social media platforms have also empowered black communities to share authentic narratives, calling out prejudice and offering perspectives that mainstream media often overlooks or misrepresents. Through these interventions, the power of media to define identity and influence perception becomes a space not just for marginalization, but also for advocacy, education, and transformation. As we consider the experiences of black individuals across the globe, it becomes clear that confronting media-driven stereotypes is inseparable from understanding historical context. Colonial legacies and systemic inequalities, the challenges black travelers, migrants, and residents face today are intertwined with representations that have been constructed and reinforced over generations, shaping perceptions, attitudes, and opportunities. Recognizing this interplay allows us to approach global encounters with greater empathy, awareness, and vigilance, appreciating both the obstacles and the resilience of black communities as they navigate spaces shaped by history, culture, and representation. By exploring these connections, we not only gain insight into the lived realities of black people worldwide, but also identify pathways toward more equitable, inclusive, and informed societies where individuals are valued for their humanity rather than reduced to media-fueled stereotypes. Italy's relationship with African migrants provides a vivid lens through which we can understand how historical legacies, cultural perceptions, and societal attitudes intersect to shape everyday experiences of Black individuals. From the moment many migrants arrive, often fleeing conflict, poverty, or political instability in their home countries, they are met not with open arms, but with a mixture of suspicion, fear, and outright hostility. The streets of major Italian cities, once the gateways of opportunity and cultural exchange, sometimes become arenas where racial prejudice manifests in subtle and overt ways. From verbal insults hurled in crowded public spaces to the more alarming physical confrontations that leave lasting scars on both body and psyche. These interactions are rarely isolated incidents. They are part of a broader societal pattern in which anti-immigrant sentiment has become increasingly visible, fueled by political rhetoric, media narratives, and long-standing cultural perceptions that associate Blackness with social burden or danger. The challenges extend far beyond public encounters. In workplaces, African migrants often face systemic barriers that hinder professional advancement, despite possessing the skills, education, and determination to contribute meaningfully to their communities. Job applications are scrutinized more harshly, resumes with African-sounding names may be overlooked, and opportunities for promotion or fair treatment can be limited by implicit biases that remain entrenched in organizational cultures. These experiences echo the historical hierarchies established during Italy's colonial era, where African lives were devalued, and social structures reinforced the perception that Black individuals were subordinate to European authority. Though colonialism formally ended decades ago, its imprint persists in the subconscious assumptions. Structural inequalities and cultural attitudes that shape contemporary Italian society, even in spheres often celebrated for inclusivity and merit, such as sport. African migrants and Black Italians encounter a harsh reality. Football, one of Italy's most cherished pastimes and a source of national pride, has repeatedly exposed the depth of racial hostility that lingers beneath the surface. Black players, whether local or international, have been subjected to racial slurs, jeers, and even physical intimidation from crowds, a stark reminder that public admiration does not necessarily translate to respect or safety. These incidents are compounded by media coverage that can sensationalize, trivialize, or inadequately address the underlying racial issues, leaving both athletes and communities frustrated and vulnerable. Beyond professional sports, informal and community-level activities are also colored by prejudice, influencing who feels welcome in certain neighborhoods. Recreational spaces, or social circles, and shaping the daily interactions that define social belonging. Housing represents another area where discrimination subtly yet significantly affects the lives of African migrants. Securing safe, affordable, and stable accommodation often involves navigating landlords' prejudices, bureaucratic hurdles, and sometimes covert exclusionary practices. Families may find themselves relegated to marginalized neighborhoods, distant from schools, workplaces, or healthcare facilities, perpetuating cycles of social and economic disadvantage. These challenges, though less visible than street-level harassment or workplace discrimination, underscore the systemic nature of racial inequity, revealing how societal structures, cultural attitudes, and institutional practices converge to shape the lived realities of Black residents in Italy. Amid these difficulties, resilience and community building emerge as defining characteristics of African migrant experiences. Informal networks of support, cultural organizations, and advocacy groups provide essential lifelines, offering guidance, solidarity, and platforms for collective action. Through these networks, migrants share resources, knowledge, and strategies for navigating societal barriers, fostering a sense of belonging and empowerment in the face of adversity. Stories of individuals who have established successful businesses, contributed to cultural life, or pursued higher education illustrate not only personal triumphs but also the ongoing struggle to redefine societal narratives and challenge entrenched prejudices. These examples highlight the dynamic interplay between systemic barriers and human agency, showing that while discrimination persists, it is met with creativity, perseverance, and determination. Understanding the experiences of African migrants in Italy requires recognizing the historical, cultural, and media-driven factors that shape societal perceptions. The legacies of colonialism, reinforced by negative stereotypes in local and global media, create a context in which Black individuals are often seen as outsiders or burdens, even when their presence enriches communities socially, economically, and culturally. By examining these patterns, we gain insight into the broader challenges faced by Black populations across Europe and beyond, illustrating how prejudice is maintained, transmitted, and confronted in everyday life. At the same time, Italy's situation reveals the complexity of human societies, where hostility and opportunity coexist. While discrimination and verbal or physical abuse are undeniable realities, there are also spaces of inclusion, recognition, and cultural exchange. African migrants contribute to Italy's culinary landscape, arts, education, and economy, challenging negative assumptions and demonstrating the value of diversity. Their stories underscore the importance of advocacy, education, and public awareness, showing that confronting prejudice requires both systemic reform and cultural transformation. The narrative of African migrants in Italy is, therefore, not simply one of adversity. It is a story of navigating complexity, of resilience in the face of historical and contemporary challenges, and of the ongoing struggle to claim dignity, safety, and recognition in a society still wrestling with the legacies of its past. By listening to these experiences, reflecting on the structural and cultural factors at play, and supporting efforts to foster equity and understanding, we can appreciate both the depth of the obstacles and the remarkable strength of those who persevere, reminding us that the fight against prejudice is both a societal and a human endeavor that touches every aspect of daily life. In exploring the challenges faced by Black individuals around the world, it becomes clear that in some countries, prejudice is not only rooted in historical hierarchies but also perpetuated through deeply ingrained cultural attitudes, particularly those related to colorism. While colonial histories laid the foundation for discrimination, local traditions and social norms have shaped how darker skin is perceived, often equating it with lower social status or undesirability. These biases manifest across multiple aspects of daily life, from housing and access to public services to the subtleties of everyday social interactions, creating a social environment where Black individuals must navigate layers of exclusion, suspicion, or marginalization. In societies where darker skin is stigmatized, even long-term residents, students, or professionals of African descent can find themselves treated as outsiders, regardless of their citizenship, language skills, or cultural integration. Housing often becomes one of the first arenas where these biases have tangible consequences. Landlords, influenced by both traditional color preferences and modern stereotypes, may deny rental applications to Black tenants or impose more restrictive terms. Those who are able to secure accommodation frequently find themselves relegated to neighborhoods that are less desirable, distant from economic opportunities, schools, or healthcare facilities, effectively reinforcing cycles of social and economic marginalization. The disparity in housing access is not simply a matter of convenience, it shapes quality of life, sense of safety, and the ability to participate fully in community life. For many Black individuals, finding a secure place to live becomes an ongoing struggle that reflects the underlying prejudices embedded within the social fabric. Public services, too, are arenas where discrimination manifests in ways that may not be immediately visible but are deeply felt. From healthcare and education to government offices and law enforcement, Black residents often encounter systemic barriers that slow access, reduce quality, or create experiences of exclusion. In some cases, service providers may harbor conscious or unconscious biases, resulting in differential treatment that communicates a clear message of marginalization. Educational institutions, for example, may overlook Black students' contributions or fail to provide adequate support, reinforcing a sense of being undervalued. In healthcare, assumptions based on race can influence both the attention and the type of care provided, contributing to disparities in outcomes and deepening mistrust in essential public systems. Social interactions, while often more subtle, are equally shaped by traditional prejudices and colorist attitudes. In daily encounters, Black individuals may experience avoidance, undue curiosity, or intrusive questioning, reflecting a perception of otherness. These experiences, while sometimes dismissed as benign or curious behavior, accumulate over time to create a pervasive sense of exclusion. Cultural practices, local folklore, and historical narratives all contribute to a social landscape in which Blackness is coded as different, and in some instances, less desirable. This difference is not always explicitly hostile but nonetheless establishes barriers to inclusion, recognition, and social mobility, making even casual interactions sites where bias is felt and internalized. The COVID-19 pandemic dramatically highlighted these systemic biases, bringing them into sharp relief on a global stage. In several countries, Black communities were unfairly scapegoated for the spread of the virus. Despite lacking any evidence to support such claims, African migrants in urban centers, particularly in parts of East Asia and South Asia, faced evictions, denial of access to essential services, and social ostracization, all justified under the guise of public health concerns. The pandemic exposed the fragile nature of inclusion for Black residents, revealing how quickly prejudice can intersect with crisis to amplify existing inequalities. Stories emerged of Black students being refused entry to restaurants, African workers being barred from workplaces, and families being pressured to leave their homes, all in response to unfounded fears and entrenched social biases. These incidents underscore how traditional colorism and culturally embedded prejudice, when combined with misinformation and fear, can escalate into systemic discrimination that affects every facet of life. Yet, amid these challenges, the resilience and agency of Black communities remain a defining feature of their experiences. Organizations, advocacy groups, and informal networks have emerged to support individuals navigating these biased systems, offering guidance, legal assistance, and social solidarity. Through these networks, communities share strategies for confronting exclusion, ensuring that members have access to housing, services, and social resources that might otherwise be inaccessible. At the same time, the voices of those affected play a critical role in challenging the status quo, raising awareness of injustices, and advocating for institutional reforms that address long-standing inequities. The intersection of traditional colorism, systemic prejudice, and crisis situations like the COVID-19 pandemic illustrates the layered and multifaceted nature of discrimination faced by Black individuals in countries across the world. It is a form of exclusion that operates on multiple levels, from everyday microaggressions to institutional practices that reinforce inequality, demonstrating how historical attitudes and cultural norms converge to shape modern social realities. Recognizing these patterns is essential not only for understanding the lived experiences of Black residents and travelers but also for fostering greater empathy, advocacy, and cultural competence in the broader society. By examining these dynamics, we gain insight into both the obstacles Black individuals face and the strategies they employ to navigate and resist systemic bias. These experiences reveal the critical importance of vigilance, education, and social accountability in challenging discriminatory practices and fostering environments of inclusion. They remind us that prejudice is not an isolated problem but a societal issue that requires awareness, intervention, and persistent effort. As we reflect on the stories of those affected, it becomes evident that confronting colorism and systemic bias is not merely a moral imperative, it is a necessary step toward creating societies where Black individuals can live, work, and thrive without fear of marginalization, where the vibrancy of diversity is recognized as a source of collective strength rather than a reason for exclusion. In examining the experiences of African students and migrants in countries far from home, it becomes strikingly clear how cultural colorism and entrenched social hierarchies converge to create an environment rife with challenges and, at times, danger. From the moment they arrive, many young Africans stepping off planes or buses into foreign cities encounter a subtle but persistent sense of otherness, a perception shaped by centuries of societal norms that equate darker skin with lower status, lesser intelligence, or undesirability. This perception is not confined to abstract social attitudes. It manifests in very real, often distressing ways, shaping how these students and migrants are treated in housing, education, public spaces, and social life. In countries where societal homogeneity is valued and diversity is limited, the presence of Black individuals can provoke suspicion, curiosity, or outright hostility, transforming everyday activities, walking to class, shopping for groceries, or seeking housing, into fraught encounters where they are acutely aware of being visibly different. Educational institutions, which should ideally be spaces of opportunity and growth, frequently become arenas where these underlying prejudices are made tangible. African students often find themselves subject to microaggressions from peers and, in some cases, even staff, ranging from dismissive remarks to overt verbal harassment. They may be excluded from study groups, social events, or informal networking opportunities, subtly reinforcing the perception that they do not belong, despite their commitment and academic merit. In some extreme cases, students have reported physical confrontations or attacks fueled by racial prejudice, a chilling reminder that colorism and social hierarchies are not just theoretical constructs, but powerful forces with direct consequences. Even within campus settings intended to be safe and inclusive, these young individuals must navigate a landscape where systemic exclusion is embedded in both the culture and administrative practices. From biased grading expectations to limited access to mentorship and resources that favor local or lighter-skinned students. Beyond the campus, the challenges continue into the broader social environment. African migrants who arrive seeking work or stability often find themselves at the intersection of economic vulnerability and racial prejudice. Employers may harbor biases, consciously or unconsciously, that influence hiring decisions, promotion opportunities, or interactions with colleagues, creating a work environment where competence is questioned or undervalued because of skin color. Housing, too, becomes a battleground, with landlords refusing rentals, imposing unfair conditions, or steering Black tenants into marginalized neighborhoods where access to quality services is limited. These structural barriers are compounded by societal attitudes that perceive African migrants as outsiders or burdens, a perception reinforced through media portrayals, political rhetoric, and historical narratives of hierarchy and superiority. Street-level interactions further illuminate the scope of this exclusion. In public spaces, African students and migrants are often met with curiosity that borders on invasive. But curiosity can quickly shift into hostility when stereotypes of criminality, laziness, or social threat are invoked. verbal insults, harassment, and even violent attacks have been documented in multiple contexts, reflecting how cultural colorism translates into tangible risks. Football stadiums, public transportation, and markets, places that should be neutral or communal, sometimes become zones where African individuals are reminded of their perceived difference and vulnerability. These experiences reinforce a sense of exclusion that is not merely personal but systemic. Shaping expectations, behaviors, and opportunities for those trying to build new lives abroad. Historical and cultural factors amplify these challenges. Colorism, deeply rooted in both local traditions and imported colonial ideologies, assigns value based on skin tone, often equating lighter complexions with social acceptability or upward mobility while relegating darker skin to the margins. Social hierarchies operate alongside this colorism, creating networks of influence and privilege that can exclude outsiders both formally and informally. African students and migrants, regardless of their education, skill, or cultural adaptability, frequently encounter these intersecting forces, which shape not only how they are perceived but also how policies, social norms, and community structures respond to their presence. It is within this framework that both subtle biases and overt acts of discrimination take place, forming a continuum of exclusion that is difficult to escape. Despite these formidable obstacles, the stories of resilience, adaptation, and advocacy among African students and migrants are inspiring. Many develop informal networks to provide support, mentorship, and protection, creating communities that counteract isolation and marginalization. Cultural organizations, student groups, and advocacy initiatives become vital platforms for sharing knowledge, confronting bias, and asserting agency in the face of systemic exclusion. Success stories: students who excel academically, migrants who establish businesses or contribute to civic life illustrate the ability to navigate and, at times, overcome entrenched barriers, highlighting the human capacity for resilience and adaptation even in environments structured by discrimination. Understanding the lived realities of African students and migrants within these contexts requires attention to both the historical legacies of colonialism and the contemporary cultural mechanisms that perpetuate exclusion. Colorism and social hierarchies are not relics of the past. They are active forces shaping the present. Influencing policy, behavior, and societal attitudes in ways that affect the everyday lives of individuals. Recognizing this dynamic is essential for developing strategies to mitigate discrimination, foster inclusion, and build communities where diversity is genuinely valued. By connecting these experiences to broader patterns of systemic bias, observers can gain insight into how cultural prejudices operate across geographies and institutions, emphasizing the importance of advocacy, education, and social responsibility. The experiences of African students and migrants remind us that confronting prejudice requires more than acknowledgement; it demands engagement, intervention, and sustained effort to challenge both individual behaviors and structural inequities. Their stories are a testament to perseverance in the face of adversity, illuminating the complex interplay between historical legacies, cultural norms, and contemporary social practices. In witnessing these realities, we are prompted to reflect on the role of society in either perpetuating exclusion or fostering belonging, and to consider the tangible actions that can create more equitable environments where African individuals can thrive, contribute, and be recognized for their full humanity. As we broaden our lens to examine the global experiences of Black individuals, it becomes evident that systemic racism, cultural bias, and historical legacies shape life in profoundly different ways across countries. Yet they share common threads of exclusion, marginalization, and the struggle for recognition. In Israel, the story of African asylum seekers and Ethiopian Jews illustrates a complex dynamic where policy, social attitudes, and identity intersect to produce experiences of discrimination that are both overt and insidious. African asylum seekers, fleeing violence and instability in their home countries, often find themselves labeled as infiltrators by the government, facing detention, deportation, and restricted access to basic services, despite the humanitarian nature of their migration. Ethiopian Jews, though legally recognized as citizens and embraced within the framework of Israel's mission to bring Jews from around the world to the homeland, encounter systemic barriers in housing, education, and employment, alongside social marginalization that underscores the persistence of racial prejudice. Their experiences highlight a broader tension between national identity and racial inclusion, revealing how the mechanisms of the state, society, and historical memory converge to shape the daily realities of Black residents in ways that are simultaneously institutional and interpersonal. Moving northward to Ukraine, the challenges faced by Black residents, particularly African students and migrants, are intensified by the country's historical homogeneity and the ongoing conflict with Russia. The war has exacerbated societal anxieties, and in times of crisis, prejudice often becomes more visible and aggressive. African students attempting to evacuate or access essential services during the conflict frequently encountered barriers that were not faced by their white peers, from being denied transportation to limited protection in public spaces, illustrating how racial bias can be amplified under conditions of social strain. Outside of conflict-related pressures, long-term Black residents and students navigate a society in which xenophobia and cultural unfamiliarity manifest as verbal harassment, exclusion from public institutions, and even physical violence. These experiences, while deeply personal, reflect systemic patterns where Black individuals are consistently treated as outsiders, underscoring the fragility of belonging in environments shaped by historical homogeneity and limited multicultural engagement. In France, the narrative takes on a different, yet equally complex, dimension. France's colonial past, particularly in Africa and the Caribbean, has left an enduring imprint on societal structures, resulting in a paradoxical environment where Black cultural contributions are celebrated while systemic inequality persists. Black individuals in France have been pivotal in shaping the country's arts, sports, academic landscapes, from football stars like Kylian Mbappé to influential writers and artists whose work enriches French society. Yet, these contributions coexist with persistent racial profiling, underrepresentation in leadership positions, and barriers in housing and employment. The contradiction is striking. Black excellence is publicly recognized, yet the systemic challenges and discrimination that underpin social inequities remain largely unaddressed. This duality reflects the tension between France's ideological commitment to universal equality and the lived realities of those who continue to navigate the subtle and overt biases that pervade everyday life. Russia presents another challenging context, where xenophobia and racial violence have historically shaped the experiences of Black individuals. Limited historical interaction with Africa, combined with a highly homogeneous society, has often led to the othering of Black residents and students, who are perceived as threats to national identity. In major cities like Moscow and Petersburg, African students, expatriates, and Black locals frequently report harassment, verbal abuse, and, in extreme cases, physical assaults perpetrated by nationalist groups or individuals holding supremacist views. Even those born and raised in Russia are not immune, highlighting the depth of social prejudice and the systemic failures in addressing racial violence. The football arena further exemplifies this hostility, with Black players routinely subjected to racist chants, objects thrown from stands, and a general climate of intolerance. illustrating how public admiration for talent does not shield individuals from societal bias or danger. Brazil, often romanticized as a nation of racial harmony due to its diverse population, offers yet another perspective. Home to the largest population of African descent outside Africa, Brazil's black residents nonetheless contend with a deeply entrenched myth of racial democracy that obscures systemic inequities. The legacy of the transatlantic slave trade and centuries of color-based hierarchy have produced significant disparities in housing, employment, education, and exposure to violence. While black culture is celebrated in music, dance, and religious practices, dark-skinned individuals frequently face marginalization, particularly in urban centers where access to resources is uneven. The contrast between cultural visibility and social exclusion underscores the pervasive nature of inequality, revealing how societal narratives can mask the lived realities of discrimination, creating an environment where systemic injustice persists under the veneer of inclusivity. Across these nations, Israel, Ukraine, France, Russia, and Brazil, a common pattern emerges: the interplay of historical legacies, cultural biases, and systemic structures produces environments in which black individuals must constantly navigate both visible and invisible barriers, whether through policy-driven exclusion, social marginalization, or targeted harassment. These experiences reveal how race continues to shape access, opportunity, and safety in profound ways. At the same time, these narratives illuminate resilience, community building, and advocacy, as individuals and groups challenge prejudice, assert their rights, and contribute to the cultural and social fabric of their countries. By examining these diverse contexts, we gain insight into the global dimensions of racial discrimination, recognizing that while the manifestations differ, the underlying mechanisms, historical hierarchy, cultural bias, and systemic inequity are strikingly consistent. These stories remind us that confronting racial prejudice requires vigilance, awareness, and collective action, emphasizing the importance of fostering inclusive societies where diversity is genuinely valued and black individuals are free to participate fully, contribute meaningfully, and live without fear of marginalization. In acknowledging both the challenges and the triumphs of black communities across these nations, we gain a deeper appreciation of the ongoing struggle for equality, justice, and recognition that transcends borders, compelling us to reflect on our own roles in supporting inclusion and equity in a globalized world. As we reach the conclusion of this journey through the experiences of black individuals across different countries, it is essential to recognize the multifaceted nature of racism and discrimination, which does not confine itself to a single form, but rather manifests through systemic, social, and cultural channels that often intersect in complex and sometimes unpredictable ways. In many countries, historical legacies such as colonialism, slavery, or nationalistic policies continue to influence perceptions and behaviors, shaping the environments that African migrants, students, travelers, and long-term residents must navigate. Beyond history, cultural norms, societal expectations, and media portrayals play a powerful role in sustaining stereotypes and biases, creating situations where black individuals are treated differently, excluded from opportunities, or even subjected to harassment and violence. This layered reality underscores that the challenges black people face are not limited to overt hostility. They can also be subtle, pervasive, and institutionalized, making the task of understanding and preparing for these environments all the more important. Awareness, therefore, becomes the first line of defense. Recognizing the countries, regions, or communities where prejudice is more likely to occur allows black travelers, migrants, and residents to make informed decisions about where to go, how to interact, and what precautions to take. Awareness also extends to understanding the cultural and historical context of a place, including how colorism, social hierarchies, or colonial legacies influence interactions and institutional structures. By gaining insight into the ways in which these factors shape daily life, individuals can better anticipate challenges and navigate spaces more safely and effectively, whether that means choosing accommodation, securing employment, or simply moving through public spaces. Knowledge empowers, and for Black individuals in foreign or unfamiliar environments, it can mean the difference between feeling vulnerable and feeling prepared. Preparation is the next crucial step. While no one can eliminate the risk of encountering discrimination entirely, practical strategies can mitigate exposure and enhance safety. This may include connecting with local communities or diasporic networks that provide support and guidance, learning about laws and rights in a given country, or understanding local customs to avoid inadvertent conflict. Preparation also involves mental and emotional readiness, acknowledging that encountering bias or exclusion can be psychologically taxing, and developing strategies to maintain resilience in the face of adversity, equipping oneself with resources such as legal aid, community contacts, or emergency protocols provides a safety net and contributes to a sense of agency in environments that might otherwise feel hostile. Advocacy, both personal and collective, represents a third pillar of navigating these challenges. Individual advocacy involves speaking up when encountering prejudice, reporting incidents, and seeking justice where possible. Collective advocacy includes joining or supporting organizations and movements that work towards systemic change, whether through public awareness campaigns, policy reform, or community-building initiatives. Black individuals who leverage their voices and networks contribute not only to their own protection, but also to the broader effort of dismantling discriminatory systems that affect communities at large. Advocacy transforms experiences of marginalization into opportunities for action, turning personal struggles into catalysts for societal progress. Equally important is the cultivation of solidarity and support networks. Across the countries discussed, Italy, China, India, Israel, Ukraine, France, Russia, and Brazil, Black communities often rely on both formal and informal networks to navigate challenges, share information, and provide mutual assistance. These networks are crucial for survival, social connection, and psychological well-being. They offer practical help, such as housing advice, job referrals, and legal guidance, as well as emotional support, helping individuals cope with the stress and isolation that can accompany systemic discrimination. Solidarity also reinforces cultural identity, providing a sense of belonging and affirmation in environments that may otherwise marginalize Black presence. It is equally vital to acknowledge the resilience, creativity, and contributions of Black individuals, even in environments marked by exclusion and prejudice. Despite systemic barriers and social hostility, Black communities continue to shape culture, academia, sports, and public life in profound and lasting ways. From artists and writers to entrepreneurs and activists, Black individuals have continually demonstrated that talent, intellect, and humanity transcend discriminatory constructs. Highlighting these successes does not negate the existence of bias but rather provides inspiration, showing that adversity can coexist with achievement and that social progress is possible even in the face of persistent challenges. Ultimately, navigating countries where Black individuals may face heightened risks requires a combination of awareness, preparation, advocacy, and resilience. By understanding the historical and cultural factors that underpin prejudice, taking proactive steps to protect oneself and engage with supportive communities, and using individual and collective voices to challenge systemic inequities. Black people can move through these environments with greater confidence and security. The journey may be complex and fraught with obstacles, yet it also presents opportunities for empowerment, growth, and meaningful engagement with diverse societies. As we reflect on these realities, it is essential for all viewers to recognize the significance of empathy, education, and allyship. Awareness of these challenges encourages us to question assumptions, confront biases, and advocate for fairness in our own communities and networks. Sharing experiences, supporting anti-racist initiatives, and promoting inclusive policies all contribute to creating a world in which Black individuals can live, travel, and thrive without fear of discrimination. Thank you for watching and joining this discussion on a topic that impacts millions worldwide. Your engagement matters, so please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more content exploring social justice, history, and global experiences. By staying informed and connected, we can contribute to building a world where equity and respect are not aspirational but fundamental realities for everyone, regardless of skin color.